desirable offer, but
Yeah?
I don't know right now.
Hmm. Should let me know, okay?
Well, I will.
Okay. Maybe soon?
Yeah, we'll think about it.
What's the
How
problem with
about
wanting?
you get to recording with them first, and then after you're done recording with them, you can circle back over here.
Circle back, huh?
And why are you recording right now?
Welcome back to Currently Right Now, Wife, Mom, Me. This is your host, Ariane Mayweather. Happy Mother's Day! Oh my goodness. So, I just picked Aubrey up from work and I asked her when was she gonna record with me. And of course, in true Aubrey fashion, she's looking at me. She gave me the runaround, which you just heard. That is typically how most of the exchanges go between me and my girls. But it is Mother's Day and it is in the evening, and I've had a glorious and wonderful day. I got to celebrate my mom, I got to celebrate my mother in law. My husband and children celebrated me. And I mean, what a Mother's Day. Every year for me with Mother's Day is special. I love, 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 love. And I can't even, it's just when you think about being a mom and you think about the title of mother and what it holds and who you are, to them, you're mom. But when you're doing the act of motherhood, it is a 24/7, 365 year job. Even today, I got up, I made breakfast, before me and my husband left to the movies. I started dinner and everyone ate. Now, maybe you all are like, why would you cook breakfast on Mother's Day? Why'd you cook your own dinner? Well, one, who else is going to do it? And the girls can cook, but what I wanted, I don't think they're quite there as of yet. And I wanted something to taste good. And overall, I love cooking, so I didn't mind it. Now, if my oldest Angel was here, I definitely would have tasked her with the job of cooking breakfast and dinner. And then some would say, why wouldn't you go out to eat? I really don't want to fight crowds on Mother's Day and all that money it costs. I cook at home. Everybody gets a safe, loving meal and it's free. So there's that. Let's go over some Mother's Day facts. So it wasn't until I, thought about doing this episode, and why not? Mother's Day, of course, if we're talking about wife, mom, me. So, interesting fact, Mother's Day roots in the United States can be traced back to the 19th century with efforts by individuals like Anne Jarvis and Julia Ward Howe. Now, I don't know who they are, but whatever. So, Anne Jarvis established Mother's Day work clubs to educate women on childcare and promote a unity. Okay. Julia Ward Howe wrote Mother's Day Proclamation in 1870, urging women to promote peace. The holiday officially became an American holiday in 1914 when President Woodrow Wilson declared the second Sunday in May as Mother's Day, thanks in part to Anna Jarvis and campaign. That's pretty interesting. Here's some quick, interesting Mother's Day stats that I pulled up that I thought were pretty interesting. And I noticed that we have a trend when Father's Day comes around. The fathers like to say no one cares about Father's Day the way they do regarding Mother's Day, and maybe that is true. But let's look at it. We might have your one-offs of dad who do everything. They are the mom, the dad. They are everything. And then you have the ones that like to say, I know it's Mother's Day, but I'm a single dad, so happy Mother's Day to me. And then you have women who do that on Father's Day, like I'm a single mom, happy Father's Day to me. Like, no, babe, you're a single mother. He's a single father. Mother's Day is Mother's Day. Father's Day is Father's Day. But here are the stats. So, with that being said, Americans are projected to spend 34.1 billion on Mother's Day with an average of 259 per person. That is insane. 84% of adults plan to celebrate Mother's Day in some way. Gift categories, the most popular gifts include flowers, greeting cards, and special outings like dinner or brunch. Most popular celebrations besides gift giving, other popular ways to celebrate, including attending and hosting parties, going out for food and drinks, cooking and baking. I like the cooking and baking part. So the commercial impact. Mother's Day is a major commercial event generating significant revenue for flower, greeting cards, and jewelry industries, and is the most popular day for restaurant dining. And that is, I mean, telling, because if you live near any type of IHOP, I mean, people are packed out there starting at 7 a.m. Any other restaurant, especially after church on Sundays, on a Mother's Day, overly crowded. But you know what? Whatever it takes to celebrate your mom, I'm totally here for it. So here's some memes that I pulled up while scrolling through Instagram today, looking at Mother's Day stuff and the way everyone is just choosing to celebrate their mom. So I saw this and it says, your greatest contribution to the kingdom of God may not be something you do, but someone you raise. That's by Andy Stanley. That is quite beautiful. And I truly believe that. I always tell my girls, you know, you lead with the golden rule. You treat people the way that you want to be treated. And with that, if everyone could do that with their child, we'd raise a lot better humans. But, you know, unfortunately, sometimes depending on who's raising us, they shouldn't be raising us. And that's another rant and conversation for another day. But I also saw this and I thought it was beautiful. And it's by Lisa Buscombe. Motherhood, where love has no limits, where you wear your heart outside your body every day, where you try to do the right thing when you're not even sure if it's the right thing, where the days can be tough, but the moments will be magical, where there's tears, mess, and laughter, where you lose yourself, then find yourself again and discover a whole new part of you that you never knew existed, where you are the comfort that they need, where one cuddle can change their day around. You are their sun, moon, and stars. You are exactly what they need. You got this. Lisa Buscombe. I mean, low key made me a little teary, and that's just the way life is right now in my 40s. But that is beautiful. And I think when you think about motherhood and you think about being someone's child and you having a mother, um, and what they mean to you and all those things and in between. And my motherhood journey started when I was 19 years old. I had Angelique. I was 19 going on 20. I got pregnant right after high school. I know. I have the slogan. I carry it like a badge of honor. Marry before you carry. Rest in peace, Kevin Samuels. However, I did not do that. I was hard-headed. I didn't listen to my parents, but you know what? I had a beautiful little girl. I have a beautiful girl, Angelique. I gave birth to her Thursday morning. I went in the night before to be induced. The next day, my water broke. My mucus plug fell out. I had no idea what was going on, even though I read all the 9 months and counting books. And I gave birth to this baby girl that in the time as it's happening, I'm not sure who I'm going to have. I didn't know if it was going to be a boy or girl. I was not secretly, but I wanted it to be a boy. And I got this beautiful little girl laid on me. And my mom went back and forth with, shout out to Dr. Bracy. She's the best OBGYN ever. And my mom was like, that's a boy, that's a boy. And Dr. Bracy was like, this is a girl, this is a vagina. They gave me Angel, and I just remember holding her and smelling her. And I was like, oh my goodness, she smells like fresh flesh. That's all I can remember. And then after everyone, I saw my dad and her godfather, rest his soul. We used to call him the dancing in the doorway, because the people that were in the delivery room were my mother, Angelique's grandmother, Sydney, my sister-in-law, Danielle, and yeah, that was it in the delivery room with me. And I just remember my dad and the Angelique's godfather dancing because they were so happy it was a girl, because we had all these boys, and we had my niece Atira at the time. She was the only girl in a sea full of boys. And then here we have Angelique. She finally arrives, and everybody was just blown away. And to top it off, she looked just like me as a baby. And my dad looks at me and he goes, oh my goodness, she looks just like you when you were a baby. He was like, you know, the best part of this, I don't have to chastise her. I don't have to spank her. I don't have to raise her. I could just love on her because I'm a papa and this is my granddaughter. And I thought that, at the time hearing that, I was like, what is he talking about? I didn't get it. But since I am slowly, and I mean slowly to my children who are listening, creeping up on grandparenthood, which again, we don't marry until we carry, ladies. um I understand because I too cannot wait until that time. I can wait, but I can't wait until that time of becoming a grandparent and enjoying those experiences. And payback is a B, and it is a grandmother named Ariane, because let me tell you, I'm gonna rock my kids' world with their kids and I don't care. But I had Angelique, and a couple of years later, she was only for quite some time. So she's about 5, and she looks at me and she goes, I want a sibling. And you know, me and my ex-husband at the time were like, oh, okay. We planned to have another one, and it was like, you know what, she's 5, she's gonna be 5.5, let's just do it now and get it over with. At the time, let's do this, let me rewind the clock back. When I was a little girl, I knew I wanted to be a mom. And I wanted to be a mom when I was about 4 years old. You could not tell me I wasn't going to be somebody's mommy and somebody's wife. I wanted to have 10 kids, and the Lord saw fit to not allow that to happen. And He's good, and He gave me 4 beautiful daughters, but I always wanted to be a mom. Fast forward, Angelique looks at us and she says, I want to have a sister or a brother. So, you know, I get pregnant, and at this time I'm pregnant. I have a niece who's pregnant. Her baby wasn't due till March. Uh, my second daughter, Shauna, was due in December. We had a neighbor around the corner, 2 of them. One was due in December, and then I had a niece-in-law who was due in September. She had my great niece slash goddaughter in September, and another child was born that September, and then another kid was born in December, and then Ashana was born. And it was like the race to see who could have the baby first. They would walk every day, they would taunt me, and I was like, I'm gonna have this baby. Well, Ashana's due date was actually Christmas Eve, and I was not interested in having a baby during Christmas, being away from Angel on Christmas, Christmas Eve, none of that. So the night before I gave birth to Ashana, I felt a little uncomfortable. So I just was uncomfortable, and I didn't know what was happening, but I had started walking and preparing. The next day I was laying down. It was about 10, 11 in the morning. And I felt really uncomfortable. And I remember laying in the bed, and all of a sudden I felt warm liquid running down my legs. And I thought, oh my goodness, I am peeing on myself. But I couldn't get it to stop. And then it just hit me. And I said, oh my goodness, my water just broke. Well, a week prior to that, my mucus plug fell out while I was using the restroom, and it was in the toilet. So I knew my water broke, called my doctor, and he was like, you know what? Just head on over to the hospital. Well, at this time, Angelique and my great nephew were in preschool together. And so it was about 11:30. I got dressed. I told my mother, I said, my water broke. I called my ex-husband and let him know my water broke. So when I picked Angelique up from school, I dropped her off over my sister-in-law and my brother's house, and me and my mother head to the hospital. So we get to the hospital. I'm having some contractions, but leading up to that also, I also went to the grocery store because I needed Angel to have snacks and have food and be okay. And this was, I believe it was the week before Christmas. So we get to the hospital. I'm starting to have a little bit more contractions. We're laying there, and they check me and they're like, yeah, no, your water broke, so we'll get you situated. So I get admitted. I'm laying there. By the time 2, 3 o'clock rolls around, I'm having hard contractions. The nurse keeps checking me. She's checking me, and she was like, you know what, you're having contractions right on top of one another, but I'm really concerned because you're only dilated to 3. Now at that moment, those ladies should have told me to get up and walk around, but they didn't. So as I'm having these hard contractions, the Ashana's heart rate was dropping. So every time I would have a contraction, her heart rate would drop from a newborn's heart rate inside the womb should be 75 and above. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's a little bit higher than that. Her heart rate was dropping to 12, would drop to 7. If I was having a hard contraction, would drop to 3. So now they're getting alarms. They're coming in and they're checking. They're watching me have the contraction, watching Ashana's heart rate dropping. And, you know, I was getting a little concerned. And then fast forward, they looked at me and they said, we don't know what's going on. We think her umbilical cord might be wrapped around her neck. Well, we're not sure. So they said, it might be wise. Let's do an emergency C-section. Now, knowing everything I know now, obviously, hindsight, I would have said, well, let's get up. Let me walk around. Let me figure this out so I can push her out. But you know what? She's safe. She's healthy. Going to have the C-section, scariest thing ever. Listen, ladies, if you think an epidural is something, woo, ain't nothing like a spinal tap. Like, that was wild. I pushed Angel out, but I had a spinal tap with the last 3 because obviously I had to have C-sections with them. So I go ahead and I'm on the table. I'm numb, waist down, or actually chest down. Can't feel anything. And the doctors are doing their thing. And, I feel the moving and the tugging, and you could feel the pressure, and they would walk me through it. And they were like, okay, we're cutting this, we're doing that. And it's so interesting too, because you're not allowed to record the C-section at all. They would not allow my ex-husband to record anything. And they're talking about their steps, and, they're going through everything, saying my name, saying the date, the time, no tubal ligation. That's not what's happening. We're having a C-section, baby girl, whatever, and going through the steps. So once, they pulled Ashana out, I felt her come out, and she had the umbilical cord in her hand. Funny thing, during an ultrasound with her, she was playing with it, and the ultrasound tech looked and she goes, look at her, she's playing with her umbilical cord. Now everybody knows a baby has the tightest grip ever. And she said, you know what, as she grows, she'll probably let go of it. She said that is common. She said she'll probably let go of it, but she's playing with it right now. So what the doctors stated was, as I'm having the contractions, because the umbilical cord was in her hand, I'm tensing up, I'm having the contraction, so it's making Ashana tense up, which now she's clenching the umbilical cord, which was why her heart rate was dropping. Hence, I'm no longer having a contraction. I'm relaxing. She's relaxed. She's not putting pressure on the umbilical cord. So I have Ashana. I have this baby girl. We named her Ashana Ariane. She thinks we're narcissists for doing that. Whatever. It doesn't even matter. Well, fast forward, Ashana is a little over 1. And at this point in time, I am pregnant with Aubrey. I mean, what is interesting, though, was Ashana was a planned pregnancy. I got pregnant on birth control with Angel. I got pregnant on birth control with Aubrey. Aubrey's due date was scheduled for May 7th. They were going to have a C-section. I was high risk with Aubrey. So after going in and talking to the doctor, after looking over everything, they just put me on high risk. Kaiser's a different story. They're just a different hospital. So early Saturday morning, leading up to that, I was having a dream and I woke up with contractions. We get to the hospital, and now Kaiser, the one thing that I wasn't too pleased about, the doctor who you see every month for your prenatal visits, that's more than likely not going to be the doctor to deliver your baby, whomever is on call that day. Well, I go in and it's a doctor, and I kid you not, it was giving Doogie Howser. I mean, this gentleman was very young. He looked all of 27. I'm exaggerating because he was probably a little bit older than that. He had red hair and he was very young. And he goes, you know what? You're scheduled to have, a C-section on the 7th. We're here early. Let's just go ahead and have it. And he said, so we'll prep you for surgery. And I said, well, I kind of was hoping I could maybe possibly try to push her out. And he was like, oh, you want to have a VBAC? So a VBAC is a vaginal birth after C-section. I didn't know about that, but I just wanted to see if I could try. And so he goes, "Why do you want to do that?" And I said, "Why don't I only had a C-section with my second daughter because it was emergency, and I would love to push this baby out because, you know, after a C-section, the recovery is much harder." And he said, "I want you to listen to something. Do you hear the lady over there?" So I'm in triage. They're checking me, and so I'm in the labor and delivery triage. And there are, of course, women in there, in labor. So there was one lady in there and she was going through it. She was in the midst of labor. He said, "You hear that lady over there?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "She also should be having a C-section, but she wants to have a VBAC like you." He said, "So I told her I would let her try." He said, "She's been in here since last night. We're going to let her go at this till tomorrow morning. If she doesn't go into labor, she's going to have a C-section too. So if you want, I can do this for you and we can put you on Pitocin. We can do everything. And guess what? You will then end up having a cesarean because your body now only understands cesarean. When did you push out a baby?" I said, "Oh, 7 years ago." And he said, "Yeah, your body doesn't work like that. That's not going to happen." So now, granted, I am a woman of God. Possibly with prayer it probably would have happened, but I wasn't that wise back then. And I prayed in emergency situations, which obviously now I have more wisdom and discernment, and I have a stronger relationship with God. So I know God can get you through everything. I also trust doctors. I trust God, and I trust that God has given doctors the knowledge and healing hands. So I followed through, had Aubrey. And when I tell you, Aubrey still to this day is still very stoic and very cynical. But when I gave birth to her and they placed her in my arms, she had the biggest gray eyes. I mean, stone gray. And Aubrey, even now, still very quiet. It was quite the experience because obviously I didn't know who she was going to look like, and she comes out looking like me, but she had these gray, beautiful gray eyes, and she just was such a quiet baby. She never really cried, even to this day. Doesn't really cry. If she does, it's a silent cry. She'll just have tears streaming down her eyes. I remember when Aubrey was in elementary, she was probably about third grade, and I go into a parent teacher conference, and they're going over everything with Aubrey, and they said, "But she's really quiet, when something's going on, she doesn't raise her hand. I have to call on her, but she's very, very much on top of her work. She's very smart. She comes in, she does what she has to do. She doesn't make noise. She doesn't interrupt the classroom. She doesn't bother her seatmate. She's a great student." And Aubrey, to this day, still a great student, doesn't bother anybody, very stoic. She's very funny, like all my girls are very funny, but she does have a quietness about her. And I'm curious if that's how, due to me when I was pregnant. So I have Aubrey, and a few months later, you guessed it, I am pregnant again. I am pregnant with my fourth child. I mean, I am the inventor of the back to back to back. I will do that. And again, I am pregnant on birth control. Now, I know you all are thinking, you're thinking, there's no way this lady is pregnant on birth control 3 times in a row. Well, actually, it wasn't 3 times in a row, but pregnant on birth control 3 times. I was pregnant with Angel. And here's the deal. When I got pregnant with Aubrey and Ashanti on birth control, I was on orthotricycline light. Now, I don't know if they make birth control pills like that anymore. I don't know, not my jam. That party is quite over for me. Pregnant with Ashanti, her due date is in June. I was going to be the mother of 4 daughters, 3 of which were going to be 2 and under. Aubrey turned 1 in May. Ashana was already 2, and I was due to have Ashanti. And actually, her due date was July 7th. Well, because I had gone into labor early with Ashana and Aubrey, they immediately high risked me and were like, "We're going to take her because, listen, we don't think you're going to make it till then." I go in 2 weeks early. They schedule me for a C-section. I didn't even ask to have a VBAC. It is what it is. So I go in um, early in the morning to have Ashanti, and she comes out, and again, these big gray eyes, and it's like, what is happening with these gray eyes? And she just was so, she had the chunkiest little cheeks, and I just was mesmerized. Now, I never breastfed before, ever. And I have a sister-in-law, and she was, I mean, my grandmother was a stay-at-home mom, but this sister-in-law, Latrice, she was a stay-at-home mom when her and my brother first got married, and she had my nephew Trey, their first child, and she was a stay-at-home mom. So it was my first kind of real experience with a real stay-at-home mom that breastfed. All she did was breastfeed. So when we watched Trey for her one time, my mom, Trey would not take the bottle because she breastfed him all day. And that was really interesting. So after that, obviously, my whole family is PTSD over breastfed babies. They think they're all they do is cry. And my mother told me I wasn't going to breastfeed Angel. I was 19 years old. Obviously, I listened to her. I kind of wish I did, and I wish I would have breastfed. Same thing with Tashawn. I was like, no, 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 no. I have to work. Fast forward with Aubrey, I was like, no. But Ashanti, I was like, you know what? This is my last baby. I was out of work, and prior to me working, I was pregnant with Aubrey. The company I worked for went out of business. So I got to spend that last year I was off. And so I said, you know what? This is my last baby. I want to try breastfeeding. When I called those nurses, so I'm bottle feeding her, and I called them and I said, I want to try breastfeeding. Oh my goodness. It was like they threw me a parade damn near. They came in, they said, okay, well, you just gave her a bottle, so let's do this. We'll send the lactation nurse in a few hours when it's time to feed baby, and then we'll show you how to latch and do all that. Whoa, my goodness. That latching hurt really, really bad. Obviously, as time went on, it got easier, but I was determined, and I was successful because I breastfed her for a year and a month. I stopped breastfeeding her a month after she turned 1, and it was the best thing ever because it stopped my period. I mean, listen, a breastfed baby, you don't even have to get up in the middle of the night. Just roll over, here's a boob, go to sleep. It was the best thing ever. But I will say, having 3, 2 and under was very interesting. And I just remember one night I'm in the family room, I'm watching a movie or watching TV or something. And my brother Darren walks in, and Ashana's crying, Aubrey's crying, Ashanti's crying, but nobody's hurt. Everybody's okay. And he was like, after about a good 10 minutes, he looked at me. He was like, that's not bothering you? And I said, what? He was like, them crying. I said, no, they're not. They're okay. Nobody's bleeding. Nobody's dying. They're fine. I could tune them out. And I've been tuning them girls out ever since, because let me tell you, they can really go through it because they're crybabies. All of them. And they are a handful, and they're so loving. They're so funny. And I will say my motherhood journey has just been one for the books. I love being a mother. I love being a mother to my girls. It hasn't been the easiest. It's been a journey of, it's been rewarding, but it has been hard, because one thing for sure, if you think you can control someone, and my mom made a statement about this one time pertaining to another individual trying to control their man. And she said, she kills me. This is my mother. She's saying, she kills me trying to control this person. You can't even control a 3-year-old baby. That'll let you know how much you can control a human. And that has always resonated with me. And it is very true, because now, I will say, when your children are younger, especially if they're under the age of 8, you have more control over them. They're easily moldable. And I would say at that stage, what are you saying to them? What are you speaking into them? What life are you pouring into them? How are you molding them? And are you setting them up for success or for failure? And once they get about 10 and 11, that is when they're coming into their own. They're forming their own mind. They're around other children. Now we've hit junior high, and they are easily influenced. And I will say, no more than ever are we in a day and age where, as a parent and a mother, I am competing with social media. I'm competing with their peers. I'm competing with their teachers. I'm competing with everybody outside of my orbit to parent them. Because of course I'm their mom. So they're thinking, oh, okay, you're just saying this because you're my mom. And I'm thinking, yeah, I am your mom. I have your best interests at heart, of course. But to have to compete with social media and the things that go on Instagram and Facebook, well, I'm sorry, excuse me, because the kids say only old people have Facebook, whatever. But, Instagram, TikTok, you are really competing with that stuff. So, how much of a hold do you have on your kids? And I remember being in high school and there was this commercial, and it would be a family at dinner time, and the kids would be talking to the parents. And at the end of the commercial, it would say, if you let your kids talk to you about anything, they'll tell you everything. And obviously I'm in high school, so I'm about 16, 17 when that commercial will come on. And would say, if you let your kids talk to you about anything, they'll tell you everything. And I didn't think about that because I thought to myself, that's not true. Meanwhile, I told my parents seemingly everything. I would talk to them about my day. My parents were very good about inquiring about you. And my mother was really good about reading the room. What's wrong with you? Why you got that look on your face? That whole thing, her and my dad. And you have to be really in tune with your kids. And I thank the Lord am the same way. I can walk into my home and easily recognize the mood and the atmosphere that has been shifted. I can tell immediately something is wrong. My kids don't even have to say anything to me. I can look at their face and I can tell something is wrong. And that is a gift of discernment and wisdom that all mothers have. But you have to be tuned into your children. And when Angel was a little girl and talking to her, I remember her being a baby and her sitting on the table. I just would talk to her like she was. I would baby talk her, of course, but I would talk to her while I was cooking. And she started talking early. The same thing with Deshauna. My girls have all talked early. They really, really young. They didn't walk early, right about 13, 14 months, but they all talked. But it is very true that when you let them tell you anything, they will tell you everything. And some kids, more often than not, Aubrey keeps a lot of stuff close to the chest, but I will say now that she is, becoming a young adult and that she is 17 now, she does do a lot of talking. She masks everything with a joke and she thinks everything is funny. And if something is really bothering her, I notice with Aubrey and Ashanti, they don't like me to really get people, so to speak. They more so are like, I know what you'll do, so I'm gonna be mindful in what I say. Now, Ashana and Angel, they want the hood to come out of me. They don't mind telling on somebody. I remember Angelique was, as she was transitioning from one job to another, they didn't pay her last paycheck. She gave a 2-week notice, beautifully done. And obviously, I give you a 2-week notice, my last day, you're supposed to have my check. Well, the owner manager didn't have her check. And Angel calls me as I'm coming home from work and she was like, yeah, they didn't pay me my last check. And I said, they didn't? And she said, no. I said, okay, let's do this. I want you to go in on Monday. They don't have your last check. Give me a call and I'll call. Well, she goes in on Monday. He didn't have her last check. So I called. And when I called, it was because at the time I knew about the California labor laws because I was over people. And I knew that if someone gives you a 2-week notice, a proper 2-week notice, and you are supposed to have their check for them. So, of course, I rained down hell and brimstone for my daughter. And that is the beauty about my kids. They now will tell me. And Ashana loves it. She's like, can you call so and so because da 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 da. Or we're at a Halloween festival and this one boy, I guess, who liked Angel was there. And he recognized Ashana from Angel's Instagram. And he said, your sister's Angelique. And she was like, how do you know my sister? And this kid just went in a little bit on Ashana. Ashana was like, I'm going to tell my mom and you're going to come with me. And she walks up to me and she goes, Mom, this is the kid that's been talking mess. He's talking mess about Andrew right now. Get him, go. And I have to be careful with Ashana because she will amp me up. And I was like, wait a minute, hold on. What are you saying? But it's just to show you how similar they are, but how different they are. Now with the girls, as they're growing and aging, they feel a little bit more confident and secure with me. They know I have their back. And I believe that is the beauty of parenthood. Your kids trust you to have their back. And I remember growing up and my parents would always say to me, don't let me get to that school and you embarrass me. So if you did something wrong, you better tell me because I'm going to have your back in front of those people. But when we get home, I'm getting you. So don't embarrass me in front of those people. And they meant that. And I give the same lecture and speech to my kids. I'm always going to have your back. Always, right, wrong, or indifferent. But when we get home, I'm checking you because everybody deserves correction. Everybody does. And to go through life doing something wrong or thinking you're right. And as a mother, if I know that you're not, that is my job to correct you because I cannot have you wandering through the life deaf, dumb, and blind. That is the biggest failure I could do to my child is never correcting them when they're wrong. And like I tell the girls now, you can feel how you feel. And these are your feelings and you are entitled to them. But you are wrong, dollface, when they're wrong. And when they're right, you're right. And it's interesting now watching the girls become young women. And as they go through these changes with friends, people, dating, and, you know, especially with Angelique and Hashana and them coming to me and talking to me. And I then have to use my own wisdom and discernment and understand, okay, is this a moment where they need correction? Is this a moment where they need my advice? Is this a moment where I should just, you know, be an ear and listen to them? And it's been pretty interesting watching that dynamic, of course, with a few faux pas and thinking that I do know everything. And, you know, when they're calling to just vent and tell me how they feel, I have to really pick a moment. Like, do I need to chime in and tell them when they're wrong? Obviously, with Ashana and Ashanti and Aubrey, it's a little bit different, especially when I pick them up from school. You know, they get in the car and they throw up and they tell me everything. And if one doesn't, one will always for sure shine a light on what is happening. And I love that about them, that they will correct one another. But when someone doesn't speak up, Ashana's right there to be like, no, let me tell you what your daughter did. Or Ashanti's like, Mom, let me tell you what Ashana did today. You know, or Angel will call me later in the evening like, I have something to tell you, etc. And I'm sorry, girls, but y'all tell on one another. It just is what it is. But I love that we have a space that everyone can talk and share their feelings and be open enough to talk to each other or come and talk to me. And I will say I probably got that from my mom. My mom and dad, you know, my mom was very liberal. My dad, more so kind of like a benevolent dictator. He loved you. He told you how he felt, and you could talk to him and you can tell him how you felt. But at the end of the day, whatever he said is what goes. And my mom was very liberal, and it was like, oh, okay, so you want to go to Mars and live your best life? I'll fund it. I'll let you go. And my dad would be like, no, she can't. I remember I had applied at McDonald's. I was about 16 years old and I really wanted that job. And so my dad took me to the interview and I had the interview. And so the gentleman was like, okay, I'm going to schedule you for a second interview. Come in. So I get in the car and my dad's like, how'd it go? I said, it went really well. And he was like, well, Pumpkin, you know, I've been thinking about it and you don't have to work. And I was like, what do you mean I want to? He was like, yeah, I know you do, but you don't have to work. Me and your mom, we don't really want you working. And I was like, what do you mean? And my dad spoke in parables. And instead of just being very straight up, he'll be direct, but he wouldn't be direct. And so I get home and he told my mom, he was like, you know, Marilyn, why don't you just tell her she doesn't need to work at McDonald's? And my mom would second it and be like, well, she doesn't have to if she doesn't want to, but if she wants to get a job, it's okay for her to get a job. He was like, I know, but she doesn't have to. And I don't want her to feel like she's got to go out there and get a job. And so my mother seconded again. And she was like, well, do you want to work? I said, I really do. She was like, well, like your dad said, you don't have to. Did I go back to McDonald's for that second interview? No, because my parents, in their own loving way, since the dawn of time, has done such a great job with letting me know what I don't have to do, but in more so in a way where it was kind of like, we're telling you, but we're leaving it up to you, but we're telling you no. And that has kind of been like the theme of my life, and listening to them. And I remember graduating. Well, upon getting ready to graduate from high school, I was interested in going to the Air Force. Now, all of my brothers went to the military, except for the one above me. All my brothers went to the military. I really wanted to go to the Air Force. I had met with a recruiter. They come on campus, that whole thing. I called one and I told them, hey, this is what I want to do. And so, he was like, okay, well, we need you to come in. We're going to do all the things. You got to test for it, etc. Now, hindsight's 2020 again, because looking back, I don't know if I would have qualified for the Air Force, maybe the Navy or Army, but you got to be really smart and intelligent to get into the Air Force. And, again, shout out to Angel, because she is so smart, and she got into the Air Force, and she actually tested at air traffic control. That's another story for another time. But she's not air traffic control. Anywho, and it's okay. And Angelique, I love you, and you don't have to be, but whatever. So, yeah, I go home. I tell my parents, I'm like, I talked to a recruiter. They want to meet with us. And mind you, I'm 18. I am 18. I technically would have went. And my dad said, a recruiter for what? I said, for the Air Force. I want to go to the Air Force. And he looked at me, and my mother looked at me. He was like, I don't know what you think this is, but you're not going to the Air Force. I said, what do you mean? He said, what do you mean? I said, I want to go to the Air Force. He said, no, you're not. He said, you know how long it took for me and your mother to have you? We waited all our lives to have a little girl. You're not going to the Air Force. So pick another career, another job. And I was like, but I was so hurt. I really wanted to go. And they told me no, I couldn't go. So I was kind of hurt, but it was really like, oh, I cannot go. And it's so funny, because when I tell my husband about that story, he looks at me and he goes, why didn't you just go? I was like, what do you mean? I couldn't do what I wanted to do. He was like, weren't you 18? I said, yes. And he goes, yeah, you could have. And I said, no, you don't get it. Like, I listened to them. He was like, and I wouldn't have, and I would have left. I said, but you're a boy. I was a girl. And he just, you could tell it was not giving what he thought it should have gave. She's 18. She should have went. And I was trying to explain to him, he's an only child and he's a boy. And I was like, you didn't, in the 80s and 90s, you didn't do what you wanted to do. You listened to your parents. It's a new game now. Like, these kids just do whatever, but they told me not to. I listened to them. So another story, I wanted to go to FITM, Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising. Lady came in, career day. She's telling us all about it. I'm like, yeah, I want to go. Well, it's downtown LA. So I called them. I made an appointment, that whole jam. I mean, good thing I didn't go, but whatever. I come in and I'm telling my mom all about it. And she's like, okay. And I go, so we have to go down there. And she's like, go down where? I said, we have to go downtown LA to the school and meet with the counselor, that whole thing. And she was like, LA? And I said, yeah. She was like, oh no, you're not going to LA. I said, what do you mean it's LA? 30 minutes away from here. She was like, you're not going to school in LA. I was like, well, then what am I going to do? She was like, you're not going to LA. People robbing, killing. So I was like, oh my goodness, lady. And I didn't go. And that's fine, because I would have had a big, large bill when I would have ended up having to go finish it out at a university anyways. But I got pregnant right after high school. I wanted to go to the real world. Well, the real world met me in the name of Angelique. So, but I will say God is good. And all those things lined up and shaped me for the betterment of me and for me to have these girls. And watching my mom be a mom, that is what made me want to be a mom and a wife. Watching my mother. And, you know, me and my mother bicker a lot. We're like the Bickerson sisters. She's my mom, but listen, that lady woke up waiting to argue. That's what she do. And we bicker a lot. And that's because she still wants to be head, head, head mom in charge. And I'm like, no, it's not the 90s no more. I'm an adult. But I love my mother. And she taught me a lot about being a mother. She taught me a lot about being a woman. She taught me a lot about being a wife. And I love her for that because we never came home and was no hot meal. And we had love. And her and my dad made sure that a roof was over our head and that we had anything that we wanted. And I don't mean from a materialistic point of view. I mean, truly, we got what we wanted, and it was love. And my mother and father worked hard to give us that. And I got lucky. I grew up in a neighborhood where I'm no joke. You have my mom is in one house. Next door to us was her first cousin. Next door to us was her aunt. Down the street was her aunt. Around the corner was my grandmother, and another few steps was another aunt. My grandmother and her three sisters lived in the same block as me. There was no ditching and none of that stuff because you can't stay home because there's somebody waiting to tell on you. There was a time in the neighborhood where everybody was family, and it was a beautiful thing. It had its moments where it wasn't beautiful, but for the most part, it was a beautiful thing, like growing up with your cousins and your great aunts and stuff, and having my grandmother around the corner. And I remember being little, and my grandmother used to watch me for my mom. I would get off the bus and come home because I was a latchkey kid. And there were some days where I would have to go around the corner to my grandmother's house. And my grandfather worked, and I was 10 when my grandfather passed away, but my grandfather worked. He owned his own trucking business. And I would be with my grandmother. And I just remember on the days where I was sick, and my grandmother, my dear, and listen, her name was Irene, and she too was a teen mom. Love the cycle. She was a teen mom, but granted, back in those days, it was expected. My grandmother got married. She's about 17, 18 years old, had my uncle, had my mom, and had my mom's younger sister. She was a young mom, and she didn't like that. So she told my mother and her siblings to call her my, M-Y, like my, that is mine. So my dear. When we're out in public, you don't call me mother. You call me my dear. And so obviously, you're a kid, you're listening, my dear, my dear. So it was my dear, but it sounded like Madeir, Madear. But me and my brothers called her grandmother. Me and my brother Dondi, we called my grandmother grandmother. My brother Darren, my brother Felix, and my brother Michael called her Madeir. And everybody called her Madeir. And she could bake. She made the best peach cobbler west of Texas, and they were all from Texas. And she could bake a banana cream pie. She could make a lemon cream pie. She could make her pie crust from scratch. If you wanted it, she got it. I remember one year during Thanksgiving for in elementary, we had a Thanksgiving dinner, and my grandmother made a peach cobbler. Do you know how many teachers walked up to me and told me, who made that peach cobbler? Oh, my grandmother. Oh my goodness, they couldn't believe it. It was everything. And my grandmother made her own ice cream from scratch. She had this drink called something cool that she made, and she would make it for baby showers. She used to make her chicken and dumplings from scratch. And I honestly believe that is where I get that from. My mother cooked and stuff, but my mother also worked 12-hour days and she rushed it. But my grandmother Madeir made us breakfast every Sunday. We would go around the corner at least once or twice a month with my grandmother and grandfather, and my grandmother would make these big fluffy waffles, and she would make us breakfast, and she would cook for everybody, and we would all have Sunday breakfast with her. And you know, knowing that I do that now for my children and my family, it just shows you like the DNA in it. And that is something that I learned from her. And you know, having that is just beyond beautiful. And I know a lot of people like to say, being a wife and being a mom is more than just cooking or cleaning, but that is literally the woven fabric of a household. And that is where I learned to serve your husband. Well, one, watching my mom. My father never touched a plate ever. He never touched it to take it to the table. He never picked up a plate and took it to the sink. He never touched a plate ever. And even when my mother was mad at my father, my mother always served him. Always. My father and mom had a different dynamic, but my mother was true to her duty as a wife. And that is something that has always stuck with me. And I do, granted, my father was a wonderful husband and he was good to my mom and they were good to each other. But I did learn really quickly about being a mom and being a wife and what that truly means. And watching my aunts with their husbands and watching my sister-in-laws with my brothers, um, just I will say so many women have definitely helped me in my journey in becoming a mother. And those women, watching my sister-in-law Danielle, because she lived with us, her and my brother, and she cooked, and I learned how to cook from her and my mom. And watching my sister-in-law Latrice, like I said, I never knew, like, you watch a woman and she gets to stay at home with her kids. Obviously I'm 12, 13, I don't get it, I don't know, but listen, if I could go back in time, I would have manifested that to be a stay-at-home wife and mom, obviously. But my sister-in-law Latrice loves the Lord, and I didn't get it when I was younger, but I get it now. And that is what you need to keep that family, because it's the prayers of a mother, it's the prayers of a wife, that protects her household and the peace of it. Watching my sister-in-law Danielle with my brother and loving someone through when they're sick and just holding them down. And my daughter Shauna likes to call them the real Bonnie and Clyde. She is so funny and hilarious. But watching those two women who had a direct impact on my life. And I remember when my sister-in-law Latrice, before I met my husband, I was complaining about my single time, and and she was like, you know what? It's the joy in waiting. You have to have joy and patience because you have faith. And at this point in time, I'm growing my relationship with God, and I was like, I don't know, like I feel like, I'm fighting. And she's like, no, you have joy. Like, it's coming. You have joy. And I fought that idea so much, and never more ever. I mean, I've been tested before, but and this test is a little bit different with my husband, and just waiting for things to kind of fall into place so we can be where we need to be. But I found the joy in waiting, because it's watching someone else in their determination, in their grit, and their drive for their purpose. I mean, has been one of the most beautiful things to see someone's efforts and goals being reached. And so, to my sister-in-law Latrice, thank you for telling me that and showing me that. And then, even thank you to my sister-in-law Danielle, because that whole, watching someone and being there for them, even when you feel like your back is against the wall, I mean, it is quite a beautiful thing. But going back to my dad never touching a plate, I say that to say my grandmother and my mother and my great aunts, they were serious about that. Not fixing your husband a plate, and not fixing or picking up after your husband or taking care of him. That was, they couldn't believe it if you didn't do that. Like, if they saw a woman not fix her man a plate, they would drag you for filth. And growing up in that and understanding that, and I just remember my grandmother saying, like, you have to fix your husband a plate. He's been out there, he's been fighting all day, and especially with the black man, he's been fighting battles that we just can't even conceive as women or a black woman. And don't get me wrong, yes, ladies, black ladies, I know we're out there, we experience, aggression, racism, and all that other jazz. But black men just have it harder on a different level. On a different level, they are, you know, uh, they're the prey, and they are wanted, dead or alive, and it is sickening. So yes, my husband is going to have a hot meal when he wakes up. He's going to have a hot meal before he goes to sleep. He's never going to have to touch a plate. And that is something that Ken and I battle with all the time. But I love him. And I learned that from my grandmother and my aunts. And learning to be a praying woman, my cousin Verna, I mean, she's the one that gave me the idea for the podcast, or not necessarily the idea of this, but she planted that seed, and she had been saying it for years, like, you should do a podcast. But I learned the praying aspect of it and talking about God, and being just so in tune with God and watching her. And there's so many women in my life who are mothers that I've learned from. And even if I don't come off as though I do, I definitely do have and did learn from you. And, I have a niece in law, her name is Brittany, and just watching her with her kids. Now, total together, her and my nephew have 7. They have, he came in with 1, she came in with 2, and then they had 4 together. But it is interesting watching a generation under me, because I'm a few years older than them, but watching him and her, you know, this dynamic in their household and their kids and what they're choosing for for their children. I mean, I have a great nephew named Judah, and he is something else. I mean, all their kids really are, but watching them parent their kids, it is quite interesting. But watching her be a mom and just take on things, I definitely have a respect for her, because you get to see things from a different point of view of parenting, of how I do things versus how someone else does things. So even though I'm in motherhood and my feet are planted in it, I definitely am still observing and watching people and how they choose to mother their children. And I take notes from everybody. Oh, do this. Oh, don't do that. You know, and I will say, early on, being an aunt, because my brothers are so much older than me, I got to experience being on at a young age. I remember, so I have an older niece and an older nephew that are a year older than me. And then I have a niece, Cherise, from my brother Darren. And I remember when she was born, and I was, what, 3? Because I'm going to be 44. So I believe she's turning 40 this year. And holding her. And I mean, at one point she lived with us, and it was like I had a little sister. So it was pretty interesting. And then, and then I have my nephew Chris, I have my nephew little Darren, and growing up with them, and growing up with my nephew Chucky and my nephew Dominic, and growing up with my nephew Trey. But I lived with Sharice, Chris, little Darren, and Chucky and Dominic. I lived with them. And I will say, experiencing an aunt not be kind to you is really interesting. And as a kid, I think we don't really understand when someone is being unkind to us or being cruel to us, and especially as children. As an adult, you obviously know what it is, but when you're a child, it's one thing because I tease the hell out of my nieces and nephews. I did. I'm gonna full on admit it. They love to bring it up, but I want to say to them, and like I always say, you all know thus far what I've done for you. So I don't want to hear nothing about that. I teased you all. Yes, I did. My brother Michael teased me. My brothers teased me. You know what? Listen, it's a vicious cycle. It just is what it is. But I have kids. Feel free to tease them if you need to. But you don't. But I say that to say, teasing is one thing, and being cruel and being unkind is another. And I think being an aunt is such an honorary position or title to have, because I love my nieces and nephews. I love my great nieces and nephews, and my great greats. And I don't talk to everybody every day. And they're human. I'm human. It is what it is. But I love them. And I was blessed enough, sadly, to have someone show me what it was like to be cruel and have that title of being an aunt and not be very kind. And I just remember being younger thinking, when I grow up, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to be that way to my nieces and nephews. I'm going to be there for them. And I just remember feeling away and not putting being able to put a finger on it, especially being little. And I mean like 5, 6, 7, where this person was just not nice to me and was cruel. And thankfully I had that experience. And hindsight is 2020 again, and that's the buzzword or buzz statement for this episode. But I now look back, and that needed to happen so that I wouldn't do that. Because we as adults know what it's like when someone is mean to us, but we know how to hurt someone without physically touching them, or without even, putting them in a position where they could be harmed. We as adults know how to, give the silent treatment that can be hurtful to people. We know as adults how to say cruel things to kids, and make them and belittle them and make them feel small. So if I have any aunts out here listening, I will say, before you have your own kids, if you don't yet, or if you do, being an aunt is such a sacred job. You are their parent sibling, and you are an extension of them. And being an aunt is cool, because I will go there when it comes to my nieces and nephews. And to my nieces and nephews, you all know how I feel about you all. If you all are listening, I love you all to pieces. Even if we don't talk every day, I love you to pieces. But I think in this, watching that and being an aunt shaped me for even being a better mom, because I got a chance to take care of a lot of those kids when they were babies. And I remember when I had Angel, my mom was like, "Do you need help? You need help?" I was like, "No, I got this. I got this." But I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, as my husband says. Um, I will say that parenthood and motherhood is the best hood to be from, because I swear I'm such a gangsta, but I'm a gangsta mom, and I love my kids with every being in me. Like, there aren't enough words in the English dictionary to describe the love I have for them. And I'm so happy God blessed me with being a mom and experiencing motherhood and getting to be the type of parent my children needed me to be. And thank you, God, for that experience alone. And thank you, God, for the experience, I've had with being an aunt, and being, watching my mom and watching my grandmother. And even now, the beauty of it is I have a mother-in-law, and she is beautiful. And watching her love her son the way that she does, and I tell her every time, especially on Mother's Day, thank you so much, because you raised an amazing man. You raised an awesome human being. Like, I love my husband through and through. And he was raised right, and his mother loved him, and he has a great relationship with his mom. And what my mother-in-law is teaching me, how to move forward so I can be an awesome mother-in-law to my future son-in-laws. So you you know, every day I learn something. I learn what to do, and I learn what not to do. And I just want to continue being a vessel and learning things, and just continuing being the best mom ever. But I want to thank you guys all for listening. I did not mean to get teary-eyed on this and feeling away. And I am just going to say happy Mother's Day to everybody out there listening. If you are an aspiring mother to be, wanting to be a mom, listen, pray, and ask God to give you the right foundation, to give you the right husband, to fill you with wisdom and discernment, so you can pick the correct husband, so that you can do this parenthood with. Because if nothing else, a child needs a sturdy, stable foundation, and a properly structured home with two loving parents that love them and that love each other, and that can see each other through the good times and the bad times and the best times, and times where, you know, motherhood is just unpredictable, because these kids is something else. That's just how God didn't send a manuscript down. He did the Bible, but I don't know if he factored in TikTok and Instagram and all that, but he, probably did. Anywho, don't want to ramble. But to those of you who are wishing motherhood, I pray that God opens your womb, and I pray that God puts you in the best position possible to be the best mother possible, to not be your kid's friend, but to be the mother that they need, and to choose a proper father for them. And with that, I bid you all adieu, and thank you for joining me. We'll catch you on next episode of Currently Right Now, Wife, Mom, Me. Thank you.